Thomas Pierce is the most thorough investigator and the most brilliant person I've ever met. At first, we wouldn't let him anywhere near the Smith case for obvious reasons. He worked it on his own. He made progress where we hadn't. Finally, he made it clear that if he couldn't work on Smith, he'd leave the Bureau. He even threatened to try to solve the case on his own.
You put him on the case?
He's very persuasive. He's been fanatical on Mr. Smith, works 18 and 20-hour days.
But even Pierce couldn't crack this case, I said, and pointed at the big board. Kyle nodded.
We're finally getting close, Alex. I desperately need your input, and I want you to meet Thomas Pierce. You have to meet Pierce.
I said I'd listen, I told Kyle, but I don't have to meet anyone. Nearly 4 hours later, Kyle finally let me out of his clutches. He had blown my mind all right. About Mr. Smith and about Thomas Pierce. But I wasn't getting involved. I couldn't. I finally made my way back to SAS to check on Rosie. Chet Elliott was still wearing his lab coat, gloves, and the gold-tinted goggles. His slow-gaited walk toward me said he had bad news. I didn't want to hear it. Then he surprised me and grinned. "We don't see anything wrong with her, Alex. I don't think Sinead did anything to her. He was just mind-humping you." I know, I nodded and breathed a sigh of relief. "Can I see her?" I asked Chet. "Sure you can. She's been asking for you all morning. I don't know why, but she seems to like you. She knows I'm a cool cat, too." I smiled.
London, England. Mr. Smith was dressed like an anonymous street person in a ripped and soiled black anorak. The killer was walking quickly along Lower Regent Street in the direction of Piccadilly Circus. No one seemed to notice him in the late afternoon crowds. No one paid much attention to the poor in any of the large civilized capitals. Mr. Smith had noticed that and used it to his advantage. He hurried along with his duffel bag until he finally reached Piccadilly, where the crowds were even denser. His attentive eyes took in the usual traffic snarl which could be expected at the hub of 5 major streets. He also saw Tower Records, McDonald's, the Trocadero, far too many neon ads. Backpackers and camera hounds were everywhere on the street and sidewalks. Mr. Smith suddenly felt so alone, incredibly lonely in the middle of all these people in London town. He set down the long, heavy duffel bag directly under the famous statue in the circus, Eros. Still, no one was paying attention to him. He left the bag sitting there, and he walked along Piccadilly and then onto Haymarket. When he was a few blocks away, he called the police, as he always did. The message was simple, clear, to the point. Their time was up. "Inspector Drew Cabot is in Piccadilly Circus. He's in a grey duffel bag. What's left of him. You blew it. Cheers." Sandra Greenberg of Interpol spotted Thomas Pierce as he walked toward the crime scene at the center of Piccadilly Circus. Thomas Pierce was tall. His long blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and he usually wore dark glasses. He did not look like your typical FBI agent, and in fact Pierce was nothing like any agent Greenberg had ever met or worked with. "What's being done by the local geniuses, the police?" said Pierce. "They're canvassing. Obviously, Smith has been here." They walked toward the crime scene, which was almost directly under the towering, waxed aluminum figure of Eros. One of London's favorite landmarks, Eros was also the symbol for the Evening Standard newspaper. Although people believed the statue was a representation of erotic love, it had actually been commissioned as a symbol for Christian charity. Thomas Pierce flashed his ID and walked up to the body bag, which Mr. Smith had used to transport the remains of Chief Inspector Cabot. "It's as if he's living a Gothic novel," Sandra Greenberg said. She was kneeling beside Pierce. Actually, they looked like a team, even like a couple. "Smith called you here, too, to London? Sent voicemail?" Pierce asked her. Greenberg nodded. "What do you think of the body? The latest kill. Smith packed the bag with body parts in the most careful and concise way, like you would if you had to get everything into a suitcase." Thomas Pierce frowned. Freak. Goddamn butcher. Why Piccadilly? A hub of London. Why under Eros? He's leaving clues for us. Obvious clues we just don't understand, Thomas Pierce said, and continued to shake his head.
Sampson and I drove to Wilmington, Delaware, the following morning. I had the Porsche floored the entire ride, which took a couple of hours. I had already received some very good news that morning. We solved one of the crime's nagging mysteries. I had checked with the blood bank at St. Anthony's. A pint of my blood was missing from our family's supply. Someone had taken the trouble to break in and take my blood. Gary Sinigi continued to show me that nothing was safe in my life. Sinigi was actually a pseudonym Gary had used as part of a plan to kidnap 2 children in Washington. The strange name had stuck in news stories, and that was the name the FBI and media used now. His real name was Gary Murphy. He had lived in Wilmington with his wife, Meredith, who was called Missy. They had 1 daughter, Ronnie. Actually, Sinigi was the name Gary had appropriated when he fantasized about his crimes as a young boy locked in the cellar of his house. He claimed to have been sexually abused by a neighbor in Princeton, a grade school teacher named Martin Sinigi. I suspected serious problems with a relative, probably his paternal grandfather. We arrived at the house on Central Avenue at a little past 10 in the morning. The pretty street was deserted except for a small boy with rollerblades. There should have been local police surveillance here, but for some reason there wasn't. At least, I didn't see any sign of him yet. The cars parked up and down Central Avenue were almost all American makes, which seemed quaint nowadays. Chevys, Olds, Fords, some Dodge Ram pickup trucks. Meredith Murphy wasn't answering her phone that morning, which didn't surprise me. I feel sorry for Mrs. Murphy, and especially the little girl, I told Sampson as we pulled up in front of the house. Missy Murphy had no idea who Gary really was. There were lights burning in the house. A white Chevy Lumina was parked in the driveway. The street was as quiet and peaceful as I remembered it from our last visit, when the peacefulness had been short-lived. We got out of the Porsche and headed toward the front door of the house. I touched the butt of my Glock as we walked. I couldn't help thinking that Sinigi could be waiting, setting some kind of trap for Sampson and me. The house was well kept and looked as if it had recently been painted. That had been part of Gary's careful facade. It was the perfect hiding place, a sweet little house on Central Avenue, with a white picket fence and a stone walkway bisecting the front lawn. "So what do you figure's going on with Sinigi?" Sampson asked as we came up to the front door. "He's changed some, don't you think? He's not the careful planner I remember. More impulsive." "Not everything's changed. He's still playing parts, acting, but he's on a rampage like nothing I've seen before. He doesn't seem to care if he's caught, yet everything he does is planned. He escapes. And why is that, Dr. Freud? That's what we're here to find out. And that's why we're going to Lorton Prison tomorrow. Something weird is going on, even for Gary Sinigi." I rang the front doorbell. Sampson and I waited for Missy Murphy on the front porch. No answer, I muttered. "Lights blazing inside," Sampson said. "Somebody must be here." "Miss Murphy!" I called out in a loud voice, in case someone was inside, but not answering the door. "Miss Murphy, open the door. It's Alex Cross from Washington. We're not leaving without talking to you." Sampson wandered around the side of the house, and I followed close behind. The lawn had been cut recently, and the hedges trimmed. Everything looked so neat and clean and so harmless. I went to the back door. I wondered if he could be hiding inside. Anything was possible with Sinigi. I waited on the back porch, not sure what to do next. I rang the bell. "Alex!" Sampson shouted. "Alex! Over here, come quick! Alex! No!" I hurried across the yard with my heart in my throat. Sampson was down on all fours. He was crouched in front of a doghouse that was painted white and shingled to look like the main residence. What in hell was inside a doghouse? As I got closer, I could see a thick black cloud of flies. Then I heard the buzzing. I wanted to avert my eyes, But I had to look. I crouched down low beside Samson. Both of us were batting away horseflies and other unpleasant crawling insects. White larvae was all over everything. The doghouse, the lawn. I held a handkerchief, bunched it over my nose and mouth, but it wasn't enough to stifle the putrid smell. My eyes began to water. Propped up inside the doghouse was the body of a golden retriever, or what remained of it. Blood was spattered everywhere on the wooden walls. The dog had been decapitated. Firmly attached to the dog's neck was the head of Meredith Murphy. Her head was propped perfectly, even though it was too large proportionately for the retriever's body. The effect was beyond grotesque. Meredith Murphy's open eyes stared out at me. I thought that I understood psychotic rage states, and I had seen a few of Sineji's, but nothing prepared me for the past few days. The current murders were extreme and bloody. I had the grim feeling Sineji couldn't turn off his rage, not even after a new kill. None of the murders satisfied his need anymore. Oh, God. I rose to my feet. John, his little girl, I said. His daughter, Ronnie. What has he done with her? The two of us searched the wooded half-lot, including a copse of bent, wind-battered evergreens on the northeast side of the house. No Ronnie, no other bodies, or grossly severed parts, or other grisly surprises. We looked for the girl in the two-car garage, then in the tight, musty crawl space under the back porch. We checked the trio of metal garbage cans neatly lined alongside the garage. Nothing anywhere. Where was Ronnie Murphy? Had Sineji kidnapped his daughter? I headed back toward the house, with Samson a step or two behind me. I broke the window in the kitchen door, unlocked it, and rushed inside. I feared the worst. Another murdered child. Ronnie! Ronnie! Are you in there? Ronnie! Can you hear me? I remembered her face from the last time I'd been in this house. I could have drawn her picture if I had to. Gary had told me once that Ronnie was the only thing that mattered in his life, the only good thing he'd ever done. At the time, I believed him. I was probably projecting my feelings for my kids. Maybe I was fooled into thinking that Sineji had some kind of conscience and feelings because that was what I wanted to believe. Ronnie, it's the police. You can come out now, honey. Ronnie Murphy, are you in there, Ronnie? Samson and I covered the downstairs, throwing open every door and closet as we went, calling out her name. I ran upstairs, taking the creaking wooden steps two at a time. Samson was close behind me, a shadow. Someone had ransacked the master bedroom. Someone had invaded this space, desecrated it, broken every piece of furniture, overturned beds and bureaus. Oh, no. Suddenly, I was running down the hallway, back down the stairs. I raced through the kitchen and pulled open a hollow core door between the refrigerator and the 6-burner stove. We both hurried down into the basement, into the cellar of the house, the symbolic place of all Gary's childhood nightmares. The cellar. Blood. Trains. The cellar in the Murphy house was small and neat. I looked around. The trains were gone. There had been a train set down here the first time we came to the house. I didn't see any signs of the girl, though. Nothing looked out of place. We threw open work cabinets. Samson yanked open the washer, then the clothes dryer. There was an unpainted wooden door to one side of the water heater and a fiberglass laundry sink. There was no sign of blood in the sink, no blood-stained clothes. Was there a way outside? Had the little girl run away when her father came to the house? The closet. I yanked open the door. Ronnie Murphy was bound with rope and gagged with old rags. Her blue eyes were large with fear. She was alive. She was shaking badly. He didn't kill her, but he had killed her childhood, just as his had been killed. Oh, sweet girl, I whispered as I untied her and took out the cloth gag her father had stuffed into her mouth. Everything is all right now. Everything is okay, Ronnie. You're okay now. You're okay. You're okay, baby. Everything is okay. I lied to the poor little girl. Everything is okay now. Sure it is. The groan and grunt work continued the following morning. First thing, Kyle faxed me several stories about his agent, Thomas Pierce. The stories came from cities where Mr. Smith had committed murders: Atlanta, St. Louis, Seattle, San Francisco, London, Hamburg, Frankfurt.